What if the quietest decisions you ever made, those taken while sitting alone at a table, decided whether your later years were lived freely or confined by your own body? I am 104 years old as I speak these words. I have buried friends who were stronger than me, richer than me, and far more confident than me. Most of them did not fail because of accidents or fate. They failed slowly, fork by fork, decade by decade, without realizing they were trading tomorrow for today. When I was young, no one talked about freedom the way I understand it now. Freedom was money. Freedom was travel. Freedom was doing whatever you wanted. But by the time I reached my 70s, I saw the truth with brutal clarity. Freedom is waking up without pain, deciding your schedule. Freedom is walking without asking permission from your knees. Freedom is eating because you are hungry, not because a prescription requires it. Freedom is belonging to yourself. That freedom did not arrive suddenly. It was built, and the foundation was self-control at the table. Every day I faced the same small test. How much? How often? What kind? When to stop? No applause followed these decisions. No one praised restraint. Pleasure was immediate, consequences were delayed. But I learned early that the body keeps perfect records. It never forgets what you give it or what you take from it. I am not claiming perfection. I am not claiming immunity from age. I am telling you something simpler and harder. Repeated restraint during meals created space later in life, space to move, to choose, to live without constant medical negotiation. What you call discipline at 30, you will call freedom at 80, if you survive long enough to notice. By the time I reached middle age, the pattern had become impossible to ignore. The men who ate without restraint spoke often about freedom, freedom to enjoy life, freedom from rules, freedom from denial. Yet year by year, their lives became smaller. First, it was the waistline, then the blood sugar, then the quiet arrival of pills lined up beside the sink. None of this happened suddenly. It arrived politely, disguised as normal aging. At my table, the struggle was never philosophical. It was practical. I learned to recognize hunger instead of habit. I learned the difference between stopping because the plate was empty and stopping because the body was satisfied. Portion size mattered. Timing mattered. Frequency mattered. Eating late, eating too often, eating past fullness. These were not indulgences. They were negotiations with the future. Self-control did not mean eating less forever. It meant eating deliberately. There were seasons of abundance and seasons of restraint, but restraint always returned as a baseline. I watched men who chased fullness as entertainment slowly lose the ability to walk without pain. Their meals gave them pleasure for minutes. The cost lasted decades. The most dangerous lie at the table is the idea that tomorrow will be the same regardless of what you eat today. It is not. The body compounds decisions silently. Excess becomes inflammation. Inflammation becomes limitation. Limitation becomes dependence. By the time this chain is visible, it is already difficult to reverse. Freedom later in life is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It feels ordinary. You stand up without effort. You bend without planning. You travel without calculating where the nearest hospital might be. These freedoms are invisible to the young because they still have them by default. I earned them slowly, each meal where I stopped before fullness. Each evening I chose lightness over indulgence. Each decade where restraint outweighed impulse. None of these moments felt heroic, but together they built a body that still obeys me instead of negotiating terms. This is not virtue, it is cause and effect. The table is where the contract with aging is signed again and again, whether you read it or not. In my 90s, the meaning of freedom became unmistakably clear. It was no longer something discussed in theory or admired in others. It was measured in daily realities. Could I dress myself without assistance? Could I walk outside without fear of falling? Could I eat what I chose rather than what my body was allowed? These questions separated those who lived independently from those who were managed. The men who had eaten without restraint paid in predictable ways. Their world shrank. First, the stairs disappeared from their lives. Then travel became exhausting. Eventually, meals themselves turned into regulated events: low salt, low sugar, timed medications, careful monitoring. The irony was painful. The very behavior once justified as freedom at the table had removed freedom everywhere else. Self-control at the table had protected me from that fate. Not completely. Age still arrived, muscles still weakened, but the decline was slower, quieter, and negotiable. I was not managing disease, I was managing age. That distinction matters more than people realize. Eating decisions continued to matter even late in life. Smaller portions reduced inflammation. Regular timing stabilized energy. Stopping before fullness kept digestion calm. These were not habits I adopted once. They were habits I never abandoned. The body responds to consistency, not intention. I never chased extremes. I did not starve myself or follow trends. I respected limits. I ate enough to sustain strength, but not enough to burden recovery. I treated food as fuel with consequences, not as entertainment without cost. What surprised me most was how these choices preserved autonomy. Doctors became advisors, not authorities. Medication became occasional, not permanent. Movement remained possible. The freedom to decide my own day remained intact. People often ask me for a secret at this age. I disappoint them. There is no secret, only a long chain of ordinary meals where I chose restraint over impulse. The compounding effect of those meals built a future where my body still belongs to me. You do not feel these benefits at 40. You feel them when others begin to lose theirs. Now, at 104 years old, I understand that freedom is not something you reclaim later. It is something you either preserve early or surrender gradually. No decision made at the table ever felt significant in the moment, yet together they shaped the boundaries of my life. Self-control at the table did not give me eternal youth. It did not spare me from aging. What it gave me was room, room to move, room to choose, room to live without constant supervision from disease or dependency. That is the freedom people rarely imagine when they are young because they have never lived without it. The discipline I practiced was quiet. No one celebrated it. No one warned me when I slipped. The body simply recorded everything and responded honestly decades later. This is why the relationship is predictable. Excess compounds, restraint compounds. The difference is only visible when time has finished its work. I am not offering guarantees. Many forces shape a life, but I have lived long enough to see patterns that repeat without exception. Men who practiced restraint at the table delayed decline. Men who did not lost freedom earlier than they expected. Not because of punishment, but because biology is consistent. If you want freedom later in life, do not look for it in supplements, programs, or motivation. Look at your next meal, how much you eat, how often you eat, when you stop. These small decisions do not feel powerful now, but they are decisive. One day, much sooner than you think, your body will ask for the receipt. When that day comes, freedom will not be negotiated. It will simply reflect the habits you practiced when no one was watching. That is the lesson a long life teaches quietly, one meal at a time.